Did you know that if you play the move e4 and your opponent plays the move h5, this is called the Goldsmith defense? I actually didn't know that. I learned that for myself for the first time. One of my subscribers mentioned it in a comment that somebody played the Goldsmith defense against him and won. And I was like, what is the Goldsmith defense? And so I looked it up, and this is what I found. So he sent me this game. We're going to take a look at it, and we're going to see where he went wrong. So as a general rule, when somebody plays a really weird looking move like this, like a flank pawn, maybe h6 or a6 or a5, usually the best thing to do is just ignore it. Like, just don't do anything different. Just ignore it. And what would you normally do in a chess game if you had free moves? Like if I said, hey, go ahead and move 3 or 4 times for free, what would you do? Well, you'd probably get the center. Probably play d4 and just bring your knights out, right? This is kind of like the ideal setup. Put your pawns there, you put your knights defending them. So what I recommend, if somebody does this to you, just play d4. Just get the center. You have no reason to not do that. So that's the first thing. Now, Jonathan decided to play knight c3, which is a close second move, all right? If you're not going to play d4, this is probably bringing out one of the knights is the next best thing. So we have e5 now, and it's kind of like we're just playing a normal game, e4, e5, knight c3, and then there's this random h5 move. Again, what do? We ignore it. We just develop our pieces. Bishop to c4, knight to f3 would be great moves. But what did Jonathan do? He played the move h4. And this is a pretty common mistake, I think. A lot of times when lower rated players see someone do something weird, they kind of feel like, yeah, I probably should react to that. I probably should respond to that somehow. And so here, Jonathan decides to play the move h4. Now, it's not like a blunder, but essentially you're wasting a move the same way that black wasted a move. Rather than getting a piece out, getting closer to completing your development, you're kind of wasting some time. Now, maybe he was afraid that black was going to just keep pushing this pawn down, and he didn't know how to handle that. So I want to actually show you what would have happened if, let's just say we played bishop c4, black pushes the pawn, we keep going with our development, and black pushes it all the way to h3. There's a really nice idea here, and it really shows the power of developing your pieces quickly, and it shows what's so bad about your opponent not doing that. You can actually ignore this and play the move knight takes e5 because you're going for this really powerful threat on f7, and if they take you, watch what happens. Bishop takes f7 check, forces the king to come up. Knight to g6 check is a fork. And notice how we're not even worried about this right now because we're doing threats with checks. And you might say, well, isn't my bishop hanging? It is, but we take the rook with check. King has to go somewhere. You can't go back or you get checkmated. Look at this. This leads to checkmate. Queen to e5 is just checkmate on the spot. And so basically when you have this position, the king has to either go here or go here, both of which are bad. And now that the dust has kind of settled, we can just simply play rook to g1, or you can keep piling on the advantage with knight to d5 check first. And now simply play rook to g1. Engine is saying you could even keep going with like knight to f7 check, and it's just completely crushing because if the king moves here or here, you take the queen with check, so the king would have to come out here. And then I guess, yeah, there's actually checkmate. So you don't even have to move the rook. But the point that I'm trying to make is you can actually usually just ignore crazy stuff like this and develop your pieces. That's going to be the best thing that you can do. Okay, so this is kind of what Jonathan should have done. Just keep developing the pieces. Don't even worry about that H pawn. Okay, the Goldsmith defense is bad for a reason, and the reason is you just ignore it and you bring out your pieces. All right, but what happened in the game was the move h4. And so now we kind of keep going, c6, bishop to e2, not a bad idea. He's trying to attack the pawn, but it's going to be defended relatively easily. And knight to f3. Okay, knight to f3 is fine. One move that I would have liked to see is d4. And why do I want to see d4? Well, normally when you play d4, black takes it, you take it back, and then you lose a tempo on your queen. But black can't play knight to c6 because that pawn is there. And so this would have been a great time to just get the center open, get both of those pawns out there. And why is it so important that we get both pawns out there? Because we want both of our bishops to have free reign and have like lots of options. If you play d3, then this bishop can come out, but then this one is stuck. If you play d4, they're both have all the options, right? And that's really what you want. You want to give yourself as many options as possible when you're playing chess. So I really would have liked to see d4. And that being said, knight to f3 is still a good move. And again, here would be a great time to play d4. Right? Or even better, just take the pawn. It's actually just a free pawn. Now there's one little tactic here. It almost looks like black could sacrifice the bishop and get a fork with queen to f6 and win your knight back, but it doesn't work because you can just drop the knight back to f3, right? And same idea, if black would have played queen to f6 first, it kind of looks like, uh-oh, it's a double attack, I'm going to lose something. But nope, you just drop it back and you're totally fine. Or an even better option here would be to play d4, kick the bishop away, defend your knight at the same time, right? So lots of good options for white. But what my advice for Jonathan would be to just pay attention to these hanging pawns. These are very valuable, especially because it's a center pawn, right? Once you get rid of that pawn, you can play d4 very easily, and it just kind of snowballs into a really nice advantage, okay? So he plays d3 instead, and kind of what I was talking about earlier, now the bishop is really stuck here, and this bishop is what we call a bad bishop. You want to have your bishops outside of the pawn chain, not behind the pawn chain. So ideally, you would want this bishop to be on c4 before you play the move d3, or try to find a different move besides d3. d4, like I mentioned, or knight takes e5, or something else, right? So that's one thing. And then bishop e3 is a good move, developing the bishop. I like that. Castling is fine. Now, it's a little bit risky to castle when you've moved your h-pawn. So maybe something like queen d2 and castling queenside would have made a little bit more sense, or just getting that pawn to d4 still is a good idea, but it's still not a bad idea. So he castles, bishop g5, okay. He goes back, and now he plays d4. Great. I would have liked to see that sooner, but better late than never. It's a good move still. All right. He trades here, puts the bishop there, and again, we see an opportunity where there's a hanging pawn, right? This is super important that you guys are paying attention to those hanging pawns. So you want to always be scanning. And I know this was a 5-minute game, but Jonathan had plenty of time here. He could have spent a few seconds and just kind of scanned around a little bit. And maybe he would have saw that. I guess he did spend a little bit of time, but he missed this one. This would have been a great move, right? Because now the bishop's under attack and the pawn is now weak and everything sort of crumbles when you start picking off those pawns. All right. So we get some more moves. Knight to a5. The general rule is knights on the rim are grim. So you don't want to be moving your knights to the rim unless you have a specific reason to do that. Sometimes it makes sense. You're attacking a bishop in a certain way, or you're maneuvering the knight to somewhere else. But this knight can't really go anywhere, right? You're not going to go here and get captured. You're not going to go here and get captured. You can't go back here. And so it doesn't really help the knight by going there. And so I would have liked to see a move like maybe b4, launch an attack with your pawns on the king, since the king is there, or try to get your rooks involved somehow, bring the rooks to the center, bring the queen up, and bring this rook to the open file. Something along those lines is what white should have been doing. So you don't want to be putting your knights on the rim. Now he plays b4, which I do like. You could have just done that sooner, but I do like b4. c4 is fine, getting some space. And now he takes it with the knight. And I don't know, I guess it's a blitz game, so, you know, stuff happens. But you always want to be paying attention to those pawns. You can't give away pieces like this if you want to win a game, right? You gotta take it with the pawn. It opens up the b file, which is a great thing to keep in mind when you're attacking your opponent's king. You want to try to open up files on the king so that your rooks, which are very powerful pieces, can attack, right? And so you had a good opportunity to do that here just by simply taking. Then the rook comes over, and now the queen can come over, and black has to be very careful that they don't just get checkmated, right? So instead, we see this. We lose the piece, and then we fall into the pin here, and it was all downhill from there. The queen was lost, and I think, yeah, he resigned here. So big takeaway, okay, when we talk about the Goldsmith opening, really any opening in general, when your opponent does something crazy like this, 9 times out of 10, just ignore it. Just ignore it and get the center. And if they keep doing that, just ignore it and develop your pieces, right? Like, don't even worry about it. If they're wasting all their time, just take it, whatever. The game goes on, but you're totally winning, and that's really all you want to do. So thank you, Jonathan, for letting me share this game and for making me aware of the Goldsmith opening. I had no idea. So I learned something new there. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you next time. As always, stay sharp, play smart, take care.